and Anastasia working with us today.
І ми проводимо запис наших семінарів, так
This
що
meeting is
якщо ви
being
не бажаєте
recorded.
з'явитися на
If you do
відео, будь
not want
ласка,
to appear
вимкніть
on
ваші
the
камери.
screen, please keep your cameras off.
Ще раз вітаю, шановні колеги. Дякуємо, що долучилися
Greetings
до
once
сьогоднішнього
again.
семінару. Мене звуть Світлана
Thank you,
Мельник, і я
dear
старша
colleagues, for
лекторка
being with
кафедри
us at
слов'янських
this workshop. My
просвітніх
name is
євангельських
Svetlana
мов і
Melnik. I'm a
культур.
senior lecturer
Дуже
at
приємно бачити вас
the
усіх
Slavic
сьогодні.
languages
І хочу
department.
розпочати з того,
I'm
що
happy to
ми
see you all
хочемо
here
висловити
today.
щире
And
співчуття усім нашим
first and foremost, we would
колегам
like to
із Сум,
express
зокрема, і колегам
our
із
condolences to all our colleagues from
стипендіаткам
Sumy and
цієї когорти, пані
particularly
Ганні Швендіній,
our
пані Світлані
fellows
Тарасенко,
of this
мої любі
cohort,
колеги,
Hanna
сили вам
Shvindina
і
and
витримки у
Svetlana
цей непростий
Tarasenko.
час. І трагічний
Dear
час ми
colleagues,
пам'ятаємо про вас
keep
усіх, і
strong.
ми
We
подумки
are
разом з
with
вами.
you, and we
Сьогоднішня
would like to
тема
support you.
надзвичайно важлива, бо вона
Our today's
продовжує
topic is particularly
теми цієї
relevant
травми і
since it
травматичного
is a
досвіду, який
continuation
зараз
of
переживає наше
the
суспільство.
discussions on
І я
trauma and
радо
traumatic
запрошую
experience
до
that
розмови
is experienced
пана
by
Приходька
Ukrainians
Ігоря.
now. And now I'd like to give
Пан
the floor
Ігор
to Ihor
полковник, доктор
Prykhodko. Ihor
психологічних наук,
Prykhodko
професор.
is a colonel.
Він
He
автор
is a
численних монографій,
Doctor of Science
навчальних
in
посібників та
Psychology.
наукових
He
статей,
authored
які
numerous
розкривають
monographs,
проблеми
textbooks,
психологічного
and
забезпечення
scientific articles that
професійної діяльності
explore the
українських
problems of psychological
військовослужбовців.
support for the professional
З червня
activities of Ukrainian military
2022
personnel.
року
Starting
пан
from
Ігор
June
очолює
2022,
реабілітаційний центр
he has
психологічного
headed the
відновлення
Rehabilitation
військовослужбовців
Center
після
for the
участі в бойових
Psychological
діях.
Recovery of Military
Він, зокрема,
Personnel
розробив
after
програму
participating in
психологічного
active
відновлення
combat.
військовослужбовців,
He developed
в
the
якій взяли
Psychological
участь понад
Recovery
10
Program for
тисяч
military
наших
personnel
героїв.
with
І
more
сьогодні
than
пан Ігор
10,000
буде говорити про
combatants taking
психологічне
part in
відновлення
it.
українських
Today, Igor
ветеранів
will tell
та
us about psychological
військовослужбовців після
recovery of
участі в бойових
Ukrainian
діях. Прошу, пане
military
Ігорю, вам
personnel
слово.
following combat.
Дуже дякую. Бажаю здоров'я, шановні пані та панове колеги.
Thank you very much for
Дозвольте
this
перш за все
introduction.
подякувати
Greetings, everyone.
організаторам цієї програми
First and foremost, I
за
would like
надану
to thank the
можливість приймати
organizers
участь у
for
цих заходах,
this program
продовжувати проводити наукові
and for giving us the
дослідження,
opportunity
ділитися
to
досвідом
continue
та
our
обговорювати
scholar
отримані результати з
researches
колегами.
and to share our
Дуже
experience
дякую,
with
пані
our
Світлана, за
colleagues. I
представлення.
would like to thank you, Svetlana, for
Перед
your
тим, як
introductory
перейти
remarks.
до безпосередньо
Before I proceed to my
обговорення запропонованої
presentation,
теми дослідження, декілька тез хочу викласти про
I would
сучасну
like
ситуацію
to say
з
a couple of
психологічною
words
підтримкою
on
українських
the
захисників,
state of
які боронять
affairs
нашу
in terms
країну.
of the psychological support
Відзначу,
of
що з
Ukrainian
початком
defenders.
російської агресії
With the
практично в
beginning
усіх
of the Russian
військовослужбовців,
aggression, almost
що
all
виконували бойові
Ukrainian
завдання,
servicemen,
виникав бойовий стрес,
especially those who
який
participated in
негативно
active
впливав на
combat,
фізичне та ментальне
they
здоров'я
experienced
комбатантів.
the stress, and it had negative impact on the mental state of the combatants. Under such great stress, their mental health was working on the edge, and they experienced post-traumatic stress, which caused suicidal and delinquent and addictive behaviors. Combat stress can result in immediate, long-term, and delayed mental health effects. Over time, the psychological changes in some servicemen may evolve into delayed responses to a stressful event of a threatening or catastrophic nature, which can ultimately lead to the development of post-traumatic stress disorder. To prevent the onset of mental health disorders among our servicemen, it is crucial to provide timely psychological recovery and rehabilitation. Even back then, at the beginning of the full-scale invasion, the issue of transforming the Ukrainian defense forces, including the system of psychological support for combat operations, became even more crucial. Psychological support for the combat operations is a comprehensive system of measures implemented by psychological support personnel. Its goal is to ensure the qualitative psychological selection and training of servicemen for combat missions. This system aims to form, maintain, and restore their psychological readiness to carry out combat tasks, strengthen emotional and volitional resilience to negative psychological factors in combat situations, reduce psychogenic losses, facilitate psychological recovery, and restore their mental health. The model of this system of psychological support for combat operations of Ukrainian military personnel consists of the following components: regulatory and legal support for psychological work with military personnel at all stages of combat missions, including orders, directives, guidelines, and instructions, among others. Psychological selection of candidates for military service or mobilization, as well as targeted selection of servicemen for assignment to specific military specialties. Psychological preparation of servicemen for active combat. Psychological support of military personnel during combat operation. It is worth noting that current system that is in operation in Ukraine is very similar to the American model of combat and operational stress control. Psychological readiness and support of military personnel during combat operations closely align with the American model. Uh, to enhance psychological support within military operations, Ukraine dissolved the former system of moral and psychological support bodies and established a new framework, personnel psychological support, drawing on both Ukraine's combat experience and best practices from NATO allies. At the brigade level of the armed forces of Ukraine, the role of deputy brigade commander for personnel psychological support was introduced, along with two specialized military psychological teams, a combat stress control group and a psychological support and recovery group. Each battalion now includes a deputy battalion commander and deputy company commanders responsible for psychological support. Additionally, non-staff psychological support instructors were appointed within each unit. These individuals underwent short-term training within their brigades to help identify acute stress reactions and signs of post-traumatic stress, and to learn peer-to-peer first aid techniques. To ensure effective implementation of these measures, regulatory documents have been developed to guide commanders and psychological support personnel in safeguarding the mental health of service members during combat operations. In order to ensure the quality training and practice of military psychologists, over the past 15 years, we have developed the published educational, methodological, and scientific literature that covers all aspects of psychological support from military personnel. One of the key elements of psychological support is the psychological selection of candidates for contract military service and selection of mobilized personnel. The primary purpose of psychological selection is to assess the psychological characteristics of candidates for contract military service and mobilized individuals, determine how well these characteristics align with the requirements of the profession and the conditions of military service. Additionally, it involves monitoring of the psycho-emotional state of servicemen and identifying the need for psychological support. The process is conducted at territorial recruitment centers and recruitment centers of brigades. The next component I would like to address is the psychological preparation of servicemen for combat operations. This process involves developing psychological readiness and resilience for combat in a rapidly changing environment under difficult and life-threatening conditions during prolonged physical and mental overload that is associated with military duties. Depending on the objectives and scope of coverage, psychological preparation can be individual or group. Based on the content level, it can be categorized into general, special, and targeted training. The content and methods of psychological training are outlined in military standards. Psychological training is conducted in conjunction with the tactical training of military personnel. Psychological support for the combat activities of military personnel consists of the following elements, as you can see on the slide. It is a system of psychological measures designed to maintain the psychological readiness and resilience of individuals in response to combat stressors. This system ensures psychological reliability during combat missions, prevents acute stress reactions and negative mental states, provides psychological first aid, facilitates psychological recovery after combat missions, and monitors the individual psychological characteristics of servicemen. Mobile psychological support groups are assigned to carry out psychological support activities in areas where combat missions are taking place. In the zones that are a bit further from the front and from the line of combat, and there are temporary units deployed. Apart from that, brigade military psychologists are appointed to these mobile psychological assistants and support groups, and military chaplains may also be assigned to support these efforts. As previously mentioned, each brigade of the armed forces includes a combat stress control group consisting of 5 officers and a psychological support and recovery group consisting of 4 officers. Additionally, each battalion has a deputy battalion commander and deputy company commanders. However, it is important to note that the armed forces of Ukraine face challenges in staffing due to an insufficient number of military psychologists with formal psychological education and practical experience. To promptly address the challenges of providing psychological support to military personnel during combat operations, our research center developed a mobile psychological support center already back in 2016-2017. It used to be a bus that was converted into a mobile unit equipped for delivering psychological aid. We introduced those changes during the anti-terrorist operation, and we decided to test it in combat zone. One such mobile center was produced for each operational territorial unit of the National Guard of Ukraine. However, our experience has shown that this number of mobile centers is insufficient. The Mobile Psychological Support Center is equipped with the organizational and office equipment, personal computers, and biofeedback devices. Its technical specifications allow for 365 days per year, 24/7 use, even under diverse climate conditions typical of Ukraine, with ambient temperatures ranging from -40 to +50 degrees centigrade. The interior of the bus has been specifically adapted for psychological work. It is equipped with climate control systems to ensure a comfortable environment and maximize the effectiveness of psychological interventions. Standard passenger seats and handrails have been removed, and the interior lighting had been substituted with a softer one. Considering international experience in providing psychological first aid, as well as the specific nature of combat operations in Ukraine, We have developed and tested a 3-level model of psychological first aid for servicemen, along with an algorithm for its delivery, as you can see on the slide. At the first level, self-help and mutual assistance are provided. At the second level, aid is organized by junior commanders and unit leaders. At the third level, support is delivered by military psychologists from mobile psychological support groups. Our experience has shown that it is essential to train personnel to recognize symptoms and provide first aid for the following key psychological reactions and conditions: aggressive behavior, moderate agitation, fear, terror, panic, crying, hysteria, nervous trembling, stupor, apathy, acute grief following the death of a comrade in arms, hallucinations, delusions, and suicide attempts. In addition to theoretical knowledge, it is also crucial to develop practical skills in delivering psychological first aid. A key feature of providing first aid at the first level is the immediate proximity to the scene of the accident. Assistance is delivered right after the most critical issue is the assistance that is delivered after the most critical issue is addressed. It is helping the personal safety of the affected individual. In this context, ensuring safety typically means evacuating the person to the nearest shelter. The sooner aid is provided, the higher the likelihood of psychological recovery and the prevention of post-traumatic stress disorder in the future. In such conditions, psychological first aid does not require complex or time-consuming actions. Ideally, psychological first aid should be provided by a fellow service member who is in immediate proximity to the individual at the onset of psychogenic symptoms. It is equally important that the person delivering aid maintains their own psychological resilience, utilizing all available internal and external resources.
This slide presents the three main outcome criteria for the provision of PFA: full recovery. The individual is fully capable of resuming independent functioning. Next, partial recovery. The individual regains control over their behavior. However, symptoms of combat stress persist. In such cases, further qualified assistance from a psychologist, psychiatrist, or other mental health professionals is required. And the third criteria, no recovery. The individual is unable to manage their condition or behavior and requires immediate referral to a specialized facility, for example, a military hospital or a psychiatric clinic. The next element of psychological support is the psychological recovery of servicemen after participation in combat operations. I'd like to remind you that with the outbreak of large-scale hostilities, Ukrainian servicemen began to experience acute stress reactions, along with increased signs of maladjustment, depression, demoralization, post-traumatic stress, and suicidal behavior. In response, the command of the Kharkiv Operational Group of troops made the decision to establish a rehabilitation center. The project for the psychological recovery of servicemen following combat deployment began in June 2022 and continues to this day near the combat zone, based at a clinical sanatorium in the Kharkiv Oblast. We developed a proprietary program for psychological recovery called the Invincibility Program. The aim is to strengthen mental health, restore physical and psychological resources, enhance the individual's psychological safety, and enable a rapid return to effective combat performance. Military psychologists work with the participants in the program on a rotating basis. All participants are divided into groups for group psychotherapy and psychological intervention. Usually there are 18 to 20 people per group, with 1 to 2 psychologists per group. Group work sessions are held in the morning, while individual counseling takes place in the afternoon. The initial duration of the psychological recovery program was 1 week, until June 2023, for almost a year, basically. However, due to the ongoing and high intensity of hostilities, rotation challenges, the gradual accumulation of chronic combat stress, and the increasing complexity of its manifestation, the program duration has been extended. Since June 2023, the program now lasts 2 weeks. The program has also been revised with additional psychological activities covering various topics. As Svetlana has already pointed out, the overall number of servicemen who have participated in the psychological recovery program has now exceeded 11,000 people. And I would like to point out that since February 2024, also a branch of the rehabilitation center started operating. So we have been working at 2 locations for over a year now. The main types of activities included in the psychological recovery program are as follows: psychological block, psychodiagnostics, psychological lectures, psychological training dedicated to restoring the psychological safety of the individual, practical group classes such as art therapy, self-regulation training. We also organize adaptive games, biofeedback, equine-assisted therapy, canine-assisted therapy, etc. And aside from the group work, we also provide individual consultations, and they are provided simultaneously with group activities within the main program. And the second block is medical and psychological one. It is mandatory after servicemen came to the rehabilitation center for them to see the physician, to go through the overall diagnostics, to be referred to some other doctors. So here we're talking about the restoration of the muscular and skeletal systems, such as recreational walking, massage, table tennis, billiards, swimming, water aerobics, hydro massage, and so on. Or restoration of the cardiovascular nervous system. For example, here we can do laser therapy or electrosleep. I would like to say that electrosleep is something that about 80–90% of servicemen go through because most of them have sleep problems. Also, restoration of the respiratory system. We use aromatherapy rooms and salt rooms for salt therapy. Now, social block. We are trying to organize as many cultural events as possible, concerts, tours, also family meetings for the servicemen. They can even live together and attend events together. And aside from that, various cohesion-aimed activities to strengthen unity between different units. At the beginning and end of the program, we conduct psychodiagnostics of participants using various tests. For example, on this slide, you can see the results of the dynamics in assessing the negative mental reactions and states. As you can see, there was positive progress in the mental states of the servicemen. All 16 indicators decreased in 78% of participants, such as irritation, anxiety, aggressiveness, anger, self-doubt, devastation, guilt, unwillingness to communicate, and inability to perform combat operations. 89% of participants showed a decrease in more than half of the indicators. At the end of the program, we collect feedback from the participants. These results are presented on this slide in front of you. As you can see, most program participants, over 98%, emphasize the necessity and importance of the program, highlighting the positive impact of the medical and psychological measures on their physical and mental health. The feedback scores were quite high, ranging from 8 to 9 on a 10-point scale. In addition to using traditional group and individual psychological methods, as well, we decided to include experimental group of participants in the psychological recovery program and introduce an innovative rehabilitation method called neurofeedback, aimed at reducing the manifestations of post-traumatic stress. Neurofeedback or biofeedback is a method based on the principle of biological feedback between the brain and physiological parameters of the body to improve treatment outcomes. This technique teaches patients to control their physiological functions. The core idea of this method is to help individuals become aware of their internal processes and learn to control them through external signals. The principle of biofeedback is based on measuring physiological parameters such as heart rate, respiration, electroencephalographic brain activity, muscle tone, and other indicators. The collected data is displayed on the screen in real time, allowing participants to track its dynamics. The psychologist assists the patient in interpreting this data, explaining how the body's physiological state appears during stress. Using this information, individuals learn to become aware of and regulate their physiological functions. Biofeedback consists of an input sensor, a data processing system, and an output device that displays the feedback. 4 main parameters are used: mode, content, frequency, and time. Each of them can be applied in various ways. The US-made BrainBit biofeedback device, along with the necessary software and training, was purchased with the help of concerned Ukrainians for use in the rehabilitation of military personnel. The use of biofeedback devices for individual sessions helps reduce manifestations of post-traumatic stress, for example, anxiety, irritability, aggressiveness, and other negative mental reactions and conditions. It also aids in improving sleep quality, controlling pain, and enhancing concentration skills. Using the biofeedback device in a playful manner helps improve self-regulation, increases adaptation to negative stressors, and improves mood as well as overall well-being. To determine the impact of the transformation of the mental state, having introduced it into the psychological program, we also decided to form an experimental and control groups, 30 participants in each. And we conducted the preliminary screening of the experimental and control groups using the following tests that are currently presented on this slide. Now we are analyzing the data collected and are trying to interpret. Following that, we're planning to publish an article and also present this information at a conference. I would like to point out that our experience and results have been mentioned in both Ukrainian and international publications, as well as renowned media outlets in the USA, UK, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, the Netherlands, Italy, France, Turkey, and other countries. Thus, psychological support system for Ukrainian servicemen is a set of measures that aimed at preventing the development of mental disorders caused by combat-related stressors, restored both physical and psychological resources, and preserving the overall mental health of military personnel. Implementation of this system can significantly reduce psychogenic losses, lower the risks of developing PTSD among personnel, and enhance their ability to successfully perform combat missions in the future. This ends my presentation. Thank you for your attention. But I would like now to share with you a short film. And following this short film, I will respond to all your questions if you don't mind. Yes, sure. Go ahead. The operation of our center began on June 27, 2022. When servicemen were faced with certain challenges related to the prolonged participation in the armed conflict. Back then, they had been performing combat missions for 4 months at the contact line. And you know, the human psyche cannot sustain such loads without any breaks and pauses. We are an invincible nation, but we have to protect our soldiers. We must protect our fighters because we cannot think with and live in the same paradigm as our enemy, thinking that women are gonna have more babies, so we're gonna have more people. That is what is important, to create a center to help the servicemen, to basically restart them, reboot them, provide them with psychological and health aid and health care, so that we can help them get back on track so that they can continue performing their immediate duties. Well, you know, I was depressed for some time, but you know, here I can see my family and have some rest, and that helps. You know, sometimes people should be brought to this comfortable context where they are being pampered, taken care of. That is why this kind of facilities are crucial. You know, I came from such a dirty, terrible, God for the place in the middle of nowhere where there was no electricity, nothing. And here it is completely different. You can get enough sleep, you can relax, plus there is psychological support provided to you on top of that. And there are professionals who can help you to deal with the injuries, etc. So yes, it is crucial, truly crucial. Well, the rehabilitation is coming to an end, and I feel better, both when it comes to my spirit and to my physical state. The psychologist helped us. Yeah, and I feel more confident. It definitely helps me feel better. And you know, there are so many various kinds of therapy here. For example, we could go ride horses. You know, when the war comes, it breaks people a lot. It breaks people. For example, my colleagues, they just cannot, it was hard for them to withstand that. But, you know, I think that I have even gotten younger because here I could talk to psychologists, I could see my wife, and I believe that I will definitely go back as a more cheerful person. We have a very multidisciplinary program, and it covers a few blocks. For example, psychological block, when we are engaging in psychologists. The medical block, for example, we have a salt room, we have aromatherapy room, laser therapy, and a swimming pool, as well as a social block that covers meeting families, different entertainment and concerts that are organized for our guys so that we can help them to be in a better spirit. How is this program important? And the guys who come here from the combat zone, they have to go back sometime later. That is why it is crucial for us to help them to feel as resourceful as possible, to have emotions as positive as possible, so that they're in high fighting spirit and they can go back to their units. Yeah, the psychologists are trying to communicate with everyone, to discuss everything with everyone. So, they have so many things to do, and there are so many of us here too. This was suggested by our commander. He said that it would be good for everyone to go for rehabilitation. The commander simply said that you have to do that because it will help you calm down. Your body will feel better too. I'm so overwhelmed with emotions because I want to help my country in at least some way. And, sometimes we're sitting in the circle and we would start crying, and I could not even believe that I would. But, sometimes you cry for joy too. So, people are sharing things, telling their stories, and sometimes the tears start coming from your eyes because of that. We always had donors who contributed to our center. Both local people and foreign donors helped us. And from June 5 to 8, 2022, the annual conference of the World Organization of Military Psychologists took place. And I would like to mention the organizers of this annual conference, Dr. Hubert Annan, who hosted this conference. And once again, I would like to express my gratitude. He recently celebrated his 60th birthday anniversary, and he suggested that he, his family, and his colleagues could make a contribution and transfer some funds to our rehabilitation center.
One week of stay of one serviceman is around 150, 160 US dollars, but money is not an issue. What counts is human resources, life and mental health of our people cost much more. I would like to call upon all people who actually care. And I would like to say that this center is in operation, and we hope that the victory will be achieved as soon as possible with the fewest losses. And I think it is not about money, it is all about people. We need to continue this effort, and we need to continue the work that has been started. I will tell my superiors later that we need to send more people here because we have people who really need to rest. Only 2 people from our unit were sent to this rehabilitation center. I believe that more comrades need this kind of referral. Victory is everything for us. It is our whole world. This is why we serve in the army. Well, even if I could change something, I wouldn't do that. Because I know why I'm here and what is the purpose of me being here. I wish the others would understand that too. I believe that all this situation over. Thank you very much for your attention. Glory to Ukraine, and I'm ready to take your questions now. Glory to heroes, Igor. Thank you very much for this impressive presentation. I was very much touched by the words of a Ukrainian serviceman who said that he didn't expect that it was possible to cry at in such an age as he has. Dear colleagues, should you have any questions, jump in. Good afternoon. Dear Colonel, I have the following questions. What is the maximum time for fulfilling the combat missions at the line of combat without a rotation? Well, I believe that it should be no longer than 6 months. If you don't mind, I would like to take the first question. Taking into consideration our experience and international experience, the longest period that a combatant could remain at the combat line without having PTSD is 45 days only. And unfortunately, Ukrainian servicemen stay there for much longer. It means that they all have PTSD, don't they? No, we cannot say that. Well, I would like to explain to you why not everyone will have PTSD, but I'm not sure that we have time for that. World experience and also local conflicts show us that around 15 to 20% will have PTSD. Maybe this figure is a bit higher in Ukraine. Thank you. If you don't mind, I have another question. I remember reading the fact that women are more susceptible to PTSD. And I also read that combatants' wives also might have PTSD, especially if their husbands were injured in action. What is your opinion on PTSD treatment? Can it pass on its own? How long does it last in case of women? Yes, you are right. Women are more exposed and more susceptible to PTSD. PTSD is a result of a traumatic event, and during the time of war, rape might be a traumatic event, and that is why more women suffer from PTSD than men. Well, PTSD doesn't mean that it is a mental impairment that will stay with a person for life. There are multiple factors that impact the course of treatment. For instance, internal factors, the state of a person, the internal state of a person, and external factors, for instance, conducive environment that is created by the government, as in cases where conducive environment is created in the community where a person lives, this um, PTSD may be treated, and there are many cases when PTSD is cured with these external factors. Our colleagues from Croatia shared their experience on the matter, and they told us that the level of PTSD was rather high among servicemen, particularly those who used to be hostages in concentration camps. Back then, we didn't know that there were concentration camps in Croatia. And after treatment, that was also followed by the social support and the system of social support created by the public institutions. PTSD was cured in many cases. How long does it last? How long does PTSD last? Well, it may last for your whole life, or it may last for a couple of years. In some cases, it is a lifelong condition. Thank you. Thank you, Roman, for your questions. Thank you, Ihor, for your answers. Dear colleagues, I know that this topic is a sensitive one, and I know that it is heartbreaking to hear about that. But if you have any questions, please go ahead. I see two hands raised. If I may, I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Ilya Kuznetsov, and I am a professor at the Department of Human and Animal Physiology at Volhynia State University. And since 2021, I am in a fellowship program at a university close to Indiana University. And I have a question about the neurofeedback. What are the rhythms that you are targeting in your sessions? What is the structure of sessions? How many sessions do you have, and how many days of rest do you give between the sessions? What are the stimuli that you are using? Are those visual stimuli or audio stimuli, or maybe others? Thank you for your question. I hope I will be able to take all of it. The sessions, usually we have from 5 to 10 sessions, 7 on average. The inter the interval between the sessions for the patients with symptoms of PTSD are um, a bit longer, because we started with shorter periods in between the sessions, but we saw that they had some symptoms of maladaptivity, and sometimes we had to interrupt sessions for immediate intervention. That is why we decided to opt for the medium level of frequency of sessions. And we started treating particular symptoms of maladaptivity, which resulted in positive outcomes. This work is still ongoing, and we cannot speak of any final outcomes, but as of now, we do not have medium breaks between the pauses, and not short breaks. What about the rhythm? We are using alpha rhythm, and mostly we are using visual and audio means. But at first, we need to determine whether a person in front of us is a person with visual or audio preferences in terms of cognition. And sometimes we offer some videos with light music or with some ocean wildlife, just to calm down our servicemen. Yulia, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. What about now? First and foremost, I would like to thank you for your work and for your invaluable contribution into our victory. I have the following question. Some time ago, I was listening to Katerina Polishchuk's interview. She used to be a hostage of war, and she explained her experience of communication with psychologists. She was rather skeptical about psychologists and said that many military are rather hostile towards them because psychologists are mostly basing their work on theory. And those who have gone through hell and do not trust the psychologists. Comrade in arms who have gone through similar experience helped each other. They helped one another more than the psychologists in such cases. Do you have any projects with the engagement of military into this psychological support and rehabilitation? Thank you for your question. Well, yes, I was mentioning the system of psychological first aid, and right you are at the first level. The um, tools that are used mostly are self-help and peer-to-peer first aid. Unfortunately, there are issues with the search and recruitment of military psychologists. Unfortunately, the system of psychological support for military was not reformed before the full-scale invasion. This system been means has been streamlined only 2 years ago, and yes, indeed, the psychological support was provided in a way that was dissatisfactory to the military. Unfortunately, brigades used to have only 2, 3 psychologists, and those brigades comprised mm, 2,000 plus servicemen. And you do understand that it was basically impossible to cover everyone with psychological aid. That is why we had to create a system of psychological support, as psychologists cannot offer support to everyone. Therefore, comrades in arms need to be ready to support their fellows. We are using the American system I cover, and we are using Shala, the system that is offered by Israel. And we also have Ukrainian system. We are working with those military psychologists who are currently ongoing on the continuing the professional development training. We have a lot of psychologists, but unfortunately, not everyone is willing to join the armed forces. Therefore, sometimes we have to engage people who have background in humanities, for instance, and we need to retrain them swiftly in order to respond promptly. Thank you, Halina Alexandrova. Thank you, Ihor, for your presentation and thank you for your work. I have a quick question. How can a combatant who was injured and who have all the necessary documents could be enrolled in your program, in your rehabilitation center? I would like to say that our center hosts people who come directly from the combat area. It means that uh, our soldiers come to us right from the trenches, from the zero line, and they go back to the trenches after this rehabilitation. There are other rehabilitation centers, and all the combatants are entitled to yearly rehabilitation. In order to request such a support, you need to apply you need to address your family practitioner, and you need to request the referral to a specific rehabilitation center. And this is how combatants could come to our center or to other centers. They could stay there for 2 weeks. I have the following question. What about your commanders? Are they facilitating your work? And what about the commanders in the field? Are they actually helping in the psychological support efforts? Well, to be honest, it depends. Some commanders say that I can only count on particular servicemen, and I rely on them highly, and I cannot let them go to the rehabilitation center. Unfortunately, sometimes some combatants are not allowed to go to our rehabilitation center by their commanders. We have a question from the chat. Sarah is asking to share a link to that video that you showed. And she is also asking about donations. How can we donate to this project? We can actually spread the word in our network. There is a website for our rehabilitation center, and you can find all the details over there. You can just add this information to our chat over here. We would like to exchange contact details with you. All right, I will type it into the chat box. Well, this video that I showed is rather big in size. I can send it to your email. I can send you a link, the link to it. It is more than 1 gigabyte, and I can send you a link to that video. Thank you. That would be great. Please send us this link, and we will share it with other participants. Dear colleagues, do you have any other questions, as we are out of time with this session? But if there are any final remarks, I'm ready to take them.
Thank you so much. Ihor, I have question/comment because I was working with a few psychologists who are dealing with PTSD, and I had a very negative impression because oftentimes all of these groups of psychologists, they don't interact with each other. Do you see this challenge as well? And if you do, then are there any ways to overcome these challenges? Are you taking any steps to resolve them? Because, there are various groups of people, but I don't think that they collaborate that much. Unfortunately, this is true. That is the case. Because we are working in silo. Last year, in June, we had a conference that was dedicated to psychological rehabilitation specifically. Also, there was an international conference in Kharkiv in December. And we started talking to each other. We started getting to know each other, exchanging our contact details. But, this takes time, unfortunately. I welcome any interaction, communication, joint projects, collaboration, be it with local Ukrainian colleagues or international colleagues. So yes, I always welcome any sort of collaboration. So yes, I'm also willing to share my experience, my knowledge, and engage as many professionals as possible so that we can help the guys rehabilitate, so that we can prevent PTSD development. And unfortunately, this is a challenge that we will be faced with for decades to come. Thank you so much, Colonel. Thank you so much for such an amazing presentation, for underscoring those challenges that you shared with us today. I would like to thank everyone for such good questions, and thank you so much for your service, Ihor. Thank you. Thank you. What you do is invaluable. Ladies and